the Ottawa River Musky Factory.
Slide in the drift, rocking us into another Musky Monday seminar series event. Week 11 this week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Pete Bowman is on the program this week. You guys, we've been waking up to Pete Bowman on Saturday mornings for 3 decades right now. He's been there week in and week out every Saturday for over 30 years. He's been with the Fish in Canada show, big promoter of Canada, big promoter of fishing in Ontario. And in all those years on the television, he's caught an awful lot of muskies. So we're gonna visit Pete's muskie journey today, coast to coast, end to end. And it ends with one of the greatest muskie stories ever told in the modern day. And it's not just a story. Pete was there to catch, I believe, the 2 biggest fish ever caught back to back within an hour, and they got it on film. And so we're going to visit that later on in the show with Pete Bowman himself. And before that, Dr. Sean Landsman is here to do his weekly segment of Ask the Biologist. And this week, Sean is going to answer the age-old question, why do muskies porpoise? And we've got a great video clip we're going to show you that goes along with that. And you guys can send in your comments and tell us what you've seen out there on the river. The longer you're out there, the more strange things you see. Musky porpoising is real, and Sean's going to tell us all about that today. Coming up on the Musky Monday schedule, next week, Pete Mena, American musky fishing legend. Pete's been around for decades as an educator, as a guide. He caught the most fish in Muskies Incorporated, I think a few years in a row, and that's where he got famous, and just as a relentless guide, and he's seen a lot of change in his life. So we're going to go on Pete's musky journey next week, March 29th, Jason Quintano from Lake St. Clair. Jason is a trolling monster, the most technical trolling guy I have ever been in a boat with. And we're going to explore all of his great success and the secrets that lead him to that. Great episode there. April 12th, that's a little ways away, but we're going to do a show called The Death of the St. Lawrence Muskie Fishery. And yeah, it's going to be a little bit controversial. It's a research-based show. We've got a panel of people who've been following what's been going on in a bunch of the St. Lawrence. They're informed, and they're going to inform you. And it's great timing because that leads into the Muskie Odyssey and the Muskie Research Symposium through Muskies Canada. There's the Odyssey on April 17th and 18th. And so we're doing this on the 12th, and you can go and hear Dr. John Farrell. I'll put a plug in for his presentation right now. If you love muskies in the St. Lawrence, you need to hear that presentation at the Odyssey on April 17th and 18th. So nice work on that, Lisa. You're getting fast with the cue cards. Get our thank yous in as always. Thanks to you for watching and sending in your comments and questions and feeding Sean the things that you want to hear about. Lots of people asking about muskies porpoising. So age-old question. That's the topic for this week. Keep sending them in. Thanks to Mike Spratt, my partner in Musky Factory Baits. Jason Riley, who's busy tying up magical baits like this. In case you need a marabou. Lisa Goodyear, our producer extraordinaire, Ottawa River Musky Factory guide extraordinaire, the one who makes this program flow seamlessly every week. How you doing, Lisa?
Good, thank you, John.
Awesome. Did you want to say anything this week, or we're just going to wave? And
well, we can wait, but I do have one thing. I'm pretty excited because we just finally got our custom URL for YouTube. So now it's super easy to find our new channel, youtube.com/Musky Factory. So that's kind of cool.
All right. Subscribe if you haven't already. Tons of videos there, including some links to some of the Muskies Canada stuff that we've done, the Fish in Canada stuff that we've done over the years. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you a little bit later on. Mike Kadura, always answering your questions behind the scenes. And what's that hat that you have on, Mike?
Well, John, when I first started guiding with you, you did a Fishing Canada show episode and you needed a drone boat. And I got to follow you and Pete around for the day. And the second day of the show, I got this as a reward. And you can see it's like it's new. I never, ever took it anywhere. I was so touched. It was such a thrill because Pete Bowman, again, he's one of the guys, is a real hero for me. So, yeah. And then I want to tell you, yeah, it was great. It was great. So I'm excited again, as you can tell by the funny smile on my face.
All right, and we'll get Pete to sign that for you one of these days. He's usually good at that. So next time. Fantastic as always, Mike. Thanks to Shimano. We say thanks to them every week. 100th anniversary. Shimano's been a big part of our fishing success at the Musky Factory. Love what they do. Proud to be on their team. Andre Lalone, Crestliner Boats, Mercury Motors. Andre's the best boat guy I've ever been around. Can't recommend somebody more than that. Suick Lures, Chaos Tackle, Sail, Canada's outdoor superstore. We're really happy to have you. I want to throw a shout out to a local bait maker. This is Pat Briere and a River Slick. I got this in the mail last week. Pat's a guide on the St. Lawrence, and this is a producer. So thanks a lot, Pat. Going to catch some big fish on that this year for sure. Thanks to Muskies Canada, as always. We're big promoters of Muskies Canada. Love what they do. You know, our favorite part of Muskies Canada is on the crest. It says sport fishing and research. We like what Muskies Canada does so much. We give $2 from every Musky Factory bait sold to sponsor research through Muskies Canada. And it's a good time to be doing that. You'll hear more about that at the Odyssey and the Symposium. I need to tell you about the Mississauga chapter Muskies Canada event this week. Mike Hauser, chapter chair, is hosting that. And we have Matt O'Brien from Slobland. If you're in the musky world, you know Slobland. It's one of the great names and the great brands out there. And we were talking backstage before we came out here, and Pete Bowman couldn't say enough good things about Slobland. So an event not to be missed, the Mississauga chapter event. That's this Thursday at 7 p.m. Got to be a member to be there. The Ottawa chapter is meeting tomorrow night online, Zoom session. Sean will be there doing another Ask the Biologist segment. More learning from him. Larry Lamborn will be there. Larry, my good friend Larry Lamborn, my good friend for a long time, is going to take us end to end on reels. You pay a lot for your reels. Larry's the best reel repair guy in Eastern Ontario. That said, if you own a Shimano Tranx, like me, you just put it in a box and you send it off to Peterborough, where Chris Giles fixes every Tranx in the country. So either way, catch Larry tomorrow. Some great tips to be had. Sean Landsman is going to be there tomorrow night, and Sean Landsman is here tonight as always. So how you doing, Sean?
I'm good. It's still light outside. I love the spring forward every year. It's I'm done with winter.
I do too. I really look forward to that. It's a sign of change. It's a sign of hope, even if it's still cold outside. So Definitely. We're on the same page as that. You're going to talk about musky porpoising. I brought a video. I don't think you've seen this. Lisa's going to cue it up, and we'll just go through this. And in case you don't know what porpoising is, this is an extreme example of porpoising. So let her rip, Lisa, and we'll come back and talk about this in a moment.
Musky, look at that thing. What are you doing? Look at this. I have never seen that. That is a musky. What are you doing? Stop that. What are you doing? Oh my God, that is insane. Look at him. That's a giant. Look at this. I have never seen that. That is a muskie. What are you doing? Stop that. What are you doing? Oh my God, that is insane. Look at him. That's a giant.
Have you ever seen that in person?
I've not seen that clip, and I think maybe I've seen that behavior once before, but that was definitely the best video clip of that behavior I think that I've ever seen.
I had a clip like that happen in front of me on the water about 4 or 5 years ago. It was a bigger fish than that, and it was swimming more aggressively, so you could tell the bottom of the body was working in the water. And as my head turned and the fish came into view, the first word in my brain was dog. Why is there a dog swimming out here? But it looked like the head of a golden retriever, and it went on for 30 or 40 seconds. So not the first time I've seen it, probably the biggest example, bizarre behavior. What's going on, Sean?
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of those things where I think if you fish long enough, you'll eventually see, like musky fish long enough, you'll eventually see it. And for me personally, it's just another example of how weird muskies are and how different they are than a lot of other fish swimming in our water bodies here in North America that makes them really intriguing to chase. I mean, for me, the figure 8 behavior and hitting lures right at the side of the boat is kind of unlike most other fish species, but I've certainly never seen a bass swim around with its head out of the water. I'm not sure I've ever seen a pike do it either. I've seen trout come up to the surface and do the kind of porpoising behavior, but certainly nothing like what we just saw there. So if Lisa, can you cue up my screen there? So we'll talk a little bit about this. I mean, like I said, everyone has probably seen this, and certainly if any of you watching want to share a story of having seen this behavior before, fire a story into the comments. I'm going to take a look at the comments like I always do after I quit rambling, but I'm curious to hear some stories. So if you've got a story, throw one in there. I just do want to note that really no one knows exactly why muskies do this. So this is, more or less going to be me sharing my opinion that is grounded in science, as opposed to just a wild theory. And we'll talk about what some of those wild theories are in just a moment. When we're talking about this behavior, we can really actually break up the behavior into two components. So there's the more classic porpoising behavior, but what we just saw in that video there is not what I would consider to be quote unquote porpoising. Porpoising is like what you'd see a porpoise do. They come up, they take a breath, and they go back down again. What we just saw, where the fish is swimming around with its head out of the water for an extended period of time, would be what I would call, and I think what maybe others as well call, periscoping behavior, where they actually have their heads stuck out of the water and they're swimming around for a bit. There's some pretty funny YouTube videos out there where people have recorded this behavior before. I didn't know that John was going to share a video of this, and I had found another one where this fish is just swimming along, ends up swimming right into the side of the boat that these anglers are fishing out of, and just, of course, bolts right after that. So it's almost like they're in a bit of a trance as they're doing it. It's quite bizarre. So yeah, there's several theories that if you just do a quick Google search on muskies porpoising, you'll come across some threads. I think on Musky First has a pretty long multi-page one. And, there's a whole bunch of theories here from, they're checking us out. They're trying to see where we are so they swim the other way and avoid us, which is probably why I don't catch that many fish then. They must be watching me. There's, another one where it's like, oh, they're looking for food, maybe they're looking for birds swimming around or something. But you can also see these fish do this way out in the middle of the river where there'd be no shoreline vegetation or something that birds might be sitting in. So I'm not sure about that. Other people talk about it as possibly being a way to dislodge external parasites, presumably external parasites. Most parasites in freshwater tend to be internal as opposed to external. So there's a lot of external parasites on marine fish, things like sea lice and copepods. But in freshwater is less so, I believe. Is this possible? Maybe. Some people have attributed to sturgeon jumping as getting parasites off their bodies. In fact, most scientists, this is a bit of a tangent, but most scientists think that when sturgeon jump, it's actually a form of communication. They've done some research on Gulf sturgeon. And so they found that there's actually some kind of, they make sounds after they come back in the water, and it's thought to help with group cohesion. But I digress. The other one is about digestion. And, this one is like not the most far-fetched by any means. We do know that fish will move to different areas within the water column to get into water with different temperatures in order to assist with metabolism and digestion. Some of that work's been done with salmon species. I believe sockeye salmon comes to mind with them. But why would they come out of the water? Like what function does actually sticking their head out of the water have relative to digestion? And this is a fish, muskies are a fish that already live in pretty shallow water with pretty warm water. So theoretically, I would think that they'd be in a pretty good position to quickly digest a meal and convert that into growth or energy. So I'm not sure that digestion really explains it. But to me, the most plausible explanation from a science perspective has to do with buoyancy regulation, as well as maybe something to do with actually getting a bit of oxygen right at the water's surface. And I'll get to that one a little bit later. But definitely that porpoising behavior where they come up and out and then back down in the water really quickly, to me, that's a function of buoyancy regulation. And to further explain what I mean by this, or at least convince you of my thoughts, we have to understand a little bit about swim bladder basics. In short, fish can be grouped into, these are bony fish I'm talking about. I'm not talking about sharks and cartilaginous fishes. But bony fishes can be grouped into two categories based on their swim bladders. So there's swim bladders that we kind of call open, and others that are called closed. And the technical term is physostomus for open and physoclistus for closed. And the main differences here lie in one particular structure that's found in those open swim bladder types, and that's called the pneumatic duct. And you can see the, where's my mouse here? You can see the pneumatic duct is here. So this duct actually connects the swim bladder to the esophagus, which means then they can actually come to the surface. Fish with this kind of swim bladder can come to the surface, open their mouth, force air into their throats, and then some of that air can be pushed back and moved from the throat via the pneumatic duct and into the swim bladder. And that can help inflate it. Similarly, to quickly release gas, they can actually move gas out of the swim bladder through the pneumatic duct and into the esophagus. So things like lake trout, if anyone's fished for lake trout before and you see them come up toward the surface, you'll see them burping bubble. You'll see bubbles come up to the surface maybe before you actually see the fish themselves. And that's gas being released from the fish. Now, other species like perch and smallmouth bass and walleye are physoclistus, or they're closed. They have a closed swim bladder. And they do not have that pneumatic duct. That's the thing that sets them apart from things like muskies and pike. And it's another thing that can sometimes make barotrauma really bad in those species, that they cannot force air out very quickly. And so when they're pulled from depth, it takes them a lot longer to adjust to the change in depth. So one thing that we have to understand is that fish, when they are just going about their daily lives, they can leak air, they can leak oxygen out of their swim bladders. And so they're constantly having to refill it. Now, normally they would do this by a bit of diffusion from the blood into of oxygen from the blood into the swim bladder. And in those closed swim bladder type fish, they have a system that lets them do this really quite effectively, much more efficiently than the open swim bladder type fish. But nevertheless, they're always losing oxygen from their swim bladders just through diffusion. And so one easy way a fish like a muskie or a pike can fill up their swim bladder is they just go up to the surface real quick, take a gulp of air, and then go back down to depth. So that might be one explanation for why we see them doing this, is that they've lost a bit of oxygen from their swim bladder, and they just feel the urge to fill it back up a bit. One thing to note too, along these same lines, is that research in pike has shown that it can take a long time for them to fully inflate their swim bladder just by moving oxygen from their bloodstream into the bladder itself. It can take anywhere from 5 to 17 days, according to this one study from way back in the day, 1934. But still valid science. So this is slow. This is really, really slow. And so one way to more effectively or efficiently fill up the swim bladder would be to come up to the surface really quick, take a gulp, and then go back down and force some of that air back into the swim bladder. What you may notice after seeing I can't believe I snuck in a bubbles image into a science talk. That's a first for me. I'm going to pat myself on the back for that one. But one thing you might notice when you see a fish come up to the surface in porpoise is that right after they do that, you might see a trail of bubbles following them as they descend back down. And this could be that there's a little bit of air that was maybe trapped in the mouth that's leaked out, or this could be some air that they couldn't fit any more air into their swim bladder, and some of it actually ended up leaking out through the pneumatic duct. That's possible, but that's another line of evidence that might suggest this is what's going on. Some people have also said that muskies, when they porpoise, are really hard to catch. They are hard to catch. I have caught them before. I've seen them caught before. After they've porpoised. So it's not impossible to catch them, but they can be really hard. It can be really frustrating when you see them come up and it's right there and you throw your bait over to it and nothing happens. Now, what's interesting about this is that we know in other species, for example, in Atlantic salmon, that when they eat a big meal, when fish can if they eat a big enough meal, they'll actually get negatively buoyant. And so what's happening is they're constantly having to fight this big meal, and they're constantly having to swim up off the bottom and use extra energy to help them compensate for that added big meal in their stomach. So if they want to station hold somewhere within the water column, they may need to expend a bit more energy to do that because they're negatively buoyant and they're trying to fight that big meal they just ate. So there was a little bit of research done with Atlantic salmon smolts. This is in an aquaculture setting, so it's like feeding salmon smolts food in a way that maximizes growth and without actually overburdening them. And so there was some concern that what happens if you overfeed them too much? You actually might weigh them down, and then they fight against that. They spend extra energy. They don't grow as quickly. The meat's not, they don't put on as much weight, and so on and so forth. But what these researchers found is that the salmon smolts actually have to come up and gulp air to counteract that negative buoyancy from all that food. So one reason we may be seeing these muskies come up to the surface is possibly to grab some extra air because they just ate, which might explain why they tend to be really difficult to catch after you see them do that behavior. So that's possible. But none of this really, to me, really explains what's going on when a fish is swimming with its head out of the water for an extended period of time. One thing that we do know is that fish will use what's called aquatic surface respiration. This is often used in environments with little oxygen, so things like tropical fishes. And these would be environments that get really warm. There's a lot of organic material within the water column, and it takes up a lot of oxygen as that decomposes, leaving a lot of these environments void, or at least really, really low in maybe not void, but really low in oxygen. One of the things we do know just about how oxygen moves from the atmosphere into water is that one of the ways we actually get it into the water is through diffusion. And so it's likely there's a very thin layer of highly oxygenated water right at the surface of where the water meets the atmosphere. And so what may be happening is you have these fish coming up and engaging in this aquatic surface respiration, trying to take advantage of that really thin layer of highly oxygenated water at the surface. And they, might not need a lot of it, but it's just giving them a little extra shot of oxygen, and then they go back down. So what's causing them to do that, though, if there's like a localized drop in oxygen somewhere in the habitat they were just in, not sure. But that is certainly a possibility that might explain why we see these fish cruising around on the surface with their head out of the water for an extended period of time. So as always, if you have more questions, please send them over to John, or you can email me directly, and I'd be happy to take a look at your questions and maybe feature them on a future segment.
That was fantastic, Sean. You answered questions that we always have, and since we're talking about fish farts and belches, and we have this really good science thing going on right now, thought I'd offer a couple comments on these. First, I got to say thanks to Ben Stone Fishing. That's the guy who we pulled the video off of online, and Ben didn't cast at that fish. He just sat and watched it, and it's funny. I'm thinking of the last fish that we saw, and I think we just sat and watched it and talked about it swimming around as well. So maybe that's one of the reasons why we don't catch these fish that we see on the surface. Fish that porpoise, I don't catch those either. If they're chasing a moon eye, there's usually a curl of the fish involved. It's a much more aggressive action up on the surface. And that to me is a catchable fish. These porpoising fish, I just, don't see as well. Don't catch those as well. You see gar if you're out on the Ottawa. You see the gar up porpoising even more. And that's really interesting on the Ottawa River. They actually have a primitive lung, right? And so are they doing the same thing? Are they doing the same thing then?
That last thing I talked about, the aquatic surface respiration, gars are well known for doing that. I mean, they tend to live in habitats that are pretty oxygen limited, but they have the ability to obtain some oxygen through that kind of behavior for sure.
Okay, yeah, it's something neat to see on the Ottawa, just the beak out of the water, sometimes going for a little ways. And I'll tell you, as a guide, I do look for fish farts around the boat, and we call them fish farts, but especially in the fall when you're out on a school of moon eyes are the most scared of your boat. This is a shiny silver fish that has like an "Eat Me" tattoo written on the side of it that swims around muskies, and so they're very skittish. And if you get near them with your boat, they dive right away. And to do that, they spit out bubbles, and so you can see a whole lot of bubbles coming to the surface. Even emeralds, you can see if you spook them and go down, but they're less willing to do that. And so seeing the bubbles sometimes can tell you what kind of bait fish you're on, and that you're cool. in a good place to go fishing. So there, fish farts and fish belches with Dr. Sean Landsman this week. Thanks, Sean. Great job as usual. Appreciate
and
it.
I'll answer Michael's question in the comments. So Michael, I'll get to you. I'll just answer it in the comments after this.
Okay. A pleasure as always. Love having Sean on the show. It's just a selfish thing because I get to go to Musky School every week. I love hearing what he has to say every single week. So thanks for doing that, Sean. Got to say a few things about our guest this evening before we bring him out, because I've known Pete for quite a while, and I'll tell you a secret. Guys who fish multi-species shows hate to film musky shows more than any other show. You can go and do a bass show in a day, or 2 bass shows in a day, or a pike or a walleye show or a trout show or any of those. But all those guys have gone somewhere for 3 or 4 or 5 days and caught nothing and got no show. And it's lodging and travel and time in a week. And, so when you look at what you can shoot, a musky show is a real love-hate relationship, because they get their best, some of the best, most spectacular footage of the year from those shows, and it's hard to do. And Pete Bowman's been out chasing fish and chasing muskies for for 30 years. And the Fishing Canada guys have built a huge library of musky material now, and so much so that one of their recent shows, they put out a compilation show, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I wanted to say about Pete, he's one of those guys in life that what you see is what you get. Pete is a smiling, hardworking, fun-loving, fish-loving guy who's a pleasure to share a boat with. He's a guy that you'd want to hang out with and a guy that you'd want to go and drink a beer with, you know, and he's gotten us out of bed early for 30 years on Saturday, taking us somewhere really neat to go fishing. And so Pete is every guy's fisherman, and man, he has the bug really bad. My time first goes back to fishing with Pete 16 years ago. I'm really proud to have netted him his first 50. We had an easy time with, I don't know, 6 or 7 fish on a show, and it looked easy. And the last time Pete came, we missed our poster fish on the first day. We had good conditions and we didn't get one in the boat. And I have so much respect for him because we beat the daylights out of Pete for the next 3 days and made him cast for 12 and 13 hours a day straight. And he's that guy who goes for it and earns it, and does what has to be done. And we ended up catching the giant fish that saved that through the hard work just in the last few minutes. And that segment aired last week. I think Lisa will show that clip in just a moment. That segment, I don't know if that's the fish. I'd like to think it's a bigger one, but Lisa will do this video in just a second. And my proudest moments in fishing are my mom lives in Abbotsford, BC, and she flipped on the TV a couple weeks ago, and unannounced the Fishing Canada show came on, and she got to see me on TV. So it legitimizes being a fishing guide after all these years. And Pete, you even have the 85 to 95 demographic in the lower mainland of BC locked up with your fishing program. That's pretty cool for a guy from Bowmanville, Ontario. Lisa, do you want to show that clip of the
On today's episode, we're going to cover what amounts to some of the best musky water anywhere.
Whoa, baby! Stay down! Oh my God!
Yeah!
Angelo, that's your biggest muskie ever.
Holy mackerel! Oh my God!
Oh my God! I am shaking. What a beast!
The Fishing Canada Show.
So without further ado, let's bring on Pete Bowman.
Johnny, how are you, buddy?
Fantastic. Appreciate you being here. Hope we gave you the intro that you deserve.
And, and then some. 85-year-old audience, buddy. It gets no better than that.
You own that lock, stock, and barrel for the whole lower mainland between that and the sturgeon shows that you do. So yeah, my mom is watching you. So there you go.
So awesome. Hi, Mom.
Yeah. And she'll see this one too. Not cool. Now, but she'll watch it later in the week. She's been here all along.
Awesome.
Lots of good advice. 30 years. Wow. Yeah. Do you remember the first muskie that you caught on film?
That's with you. That was that one you're talking about. My first, that trip, and then that first 50. So that was my first ever filming for muskies, and you did it, buddy. You did it again.
Really? And that Johnny goes back 16. Wow. Okay, yeah. So that's 16 years ago then. Okay, I didn't realize. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, no wonder.
You know what? You got to tell the story to everybody about that 50 that we got, because we couldn't get a good measurement on it. Remember your buddy? You said your buddy caught that same fish and reiterated the size of it to us or something. Do you remember that?
Yeah, you're flashing back. We got that fish well downriver in the Hawkesbury area, and we didn't get a good measure on it. And it was over 50, but it had a mark on its jaw. And so it was a really fresh hook mark. I recognized it. So I know who fishes down there. And I called, and sure enough, and they'd caught that fish like 3, 4, 5 days before on the opposite side of the river. So you can tell the marks that are on the fish and what they're there for. Yeah, I can tell you that story on a few different times, but that was on a great big bait on a really fun trip. And you taught me a bunch about my fishing on that trip because we traveled all over about 60 kilometers. And you said to me on our third day, you said, all of these spots, I love all your spots, all your favorite spots, all have a current situation or a current break near them. And this was like we'd covered 50 or 60 kilometers of the river. And it wasn't until you said that I realized that wherever I went on the river, that, the current seams and breaks were something that I just naturally sought out. So, it takes a bass guy or somebody from the outside looking in a lot of the times to give you different perspective and teach you on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, buddy. I don't remember saying that, but I know this little mind is working all the time when I'm on the water, no matter what species I'm after. You know what I mean? It's just what we do, right?
Yeah, fish. We think and breathe fish 24/7. Gord Pizeritis. He said that a couple of weeks ago. Now, as a bass head, I have to ask you: have you caught more muskies fishing for other species than you've caught fishing for muskies?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I have got triple the amount of muskies while I'm mostly bass fishing, sometimes walleye, than I have muskie fishing for sure. Like I fluke so many muskies. My buddies they all get a kick out of it because I'll say I got one of those jig stealers again. You know what I mean? Like usually between the amount that I catch from boat or the amount that cut me off, it's incredible. Like it really is amazing, and it's something I did want to talk about tonight because it freaks me out that like I'm using usually a crawfish imitation bait. Usually it's a jig and a pig or a craw on a Texas string. And I'm catching not big muskies, but I'm catching a lot of muskies on that and fishing dead slow on the bottom, just working it slow for smallmouth or largemouth. And then all of a sudden, boom, that bite. As soon as you get the bite, it's already not a large or a smallmouth, unless a great big giant largemouth is hungry. But otherwise, it's that dunk on your line and it's like, you set the hook and just want to make sure you get your jig back sort of thing. But, I've caught a ton of them. Luckily, just fluke, I guess.
And well, it's not fluke. There's a whole lot of logic behind you running into it. And you're not the only bass guy who does this. So are these fish in the weeds, out off the weeds? You're describing a jig and pig. So a weedless setup in heavy cover.
Right. Well, that's a great point because most of these fish are, you're going to freak at this, but open water on the bottom. And a very interesting note I've noticed now, anybody that's watched the Fishing Canada show knows we're with Garmin, and most people nowadays, they've heard of live scope, et cetera, et cetera. So when I'm live scoping on these areas, on these lakes, looking for bass, usually smallmouth, because smallmouth show up really nice. They're up off the bottom, they're blocked, they're round, et cetera, et cetera. I maybe have seen one or two muskies in my entire life on that scope before I've caught them. Otherwise, I don't see any of them. They got to be hugging so close to the bottom, swimming so close to the bottom, because if they're up, you will see them on this. Like, there's no doubt about it. Anybody that's seen demonstrations on it, if you see a fish on live scope, it shows up. The bigger the fish, the more it shows up, right? I don't see any of them. They are hugging the bottom or sitting on bottom. I don't know. Maybe Sean could tell us about that. And it's usually a softer bottom, believe it or not the hard bottom you think the rock or right in the weeds. It's usually a softer bottom away from the weeds or away from the rocks. Maybe close enough to them, but I've got a lot of muskies doing that. And I know that's probably just to most people just saying, what the hell is he talking about? You know what I mean? Because these fish are random. They really are random in the sense of where they are in these certain lakes. And it's usually small water, small lakes, you know what I mean, that have these, but multi-species small lakes. But you don't see them. They're bottom huggers, these fish.
Sean in Project Noble Beast, one of the greatest studies done in the modern day in tracking fish through the whole season. 2/3 of the time, the muskies that he tracked were on or near the bottom, inactive.
Okay.
And so they absolute glued to the bottom.
Yeah.
And the bigger they are, the tighter they are to the bottom. And so spotting them, I was out with the Garmin live scope in December. And I sat and jigged a bait off the side of my boat for 2 hours because I wanted to see a muskie come in on it. And when it did, there was no mistake. It
Oh,
came
yeah.
in, it swam, it went away, it came back, 3 good looks at it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you know exactly what you're looking at, but the fish
Yeah.
glued to the bottom, absolutely not an accident. And so your jig being in the absolute right place to appeal to that fish, or if you throw it long enough, you're going to end up in front of the snout of a fish that,
Exactly.
even if it's inactive, if
Yeah.
it's right there, that's the kind of thing that induces a bite. Now, I thought you were going to answer in the thick cover at first, because have you ever fished a bass tournament on the Rito here?
Oh, years ago. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys have filmed on the Rito, I'm sure, a bunch of times over the years. But the bass guys who fish tournaments on the Rito, they hate muskies.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll tell you the muskie guys go out and work all day to catch a fish, or maybe 2 fish on the Rito, because it's actually statistically easier there to catch a muskie than it is on the Ottawa. We'll talk about small fish water, in a few minutes. But the tournament guys run into 3 muskies a day. And they hate it. And they're back flipping the heavy weeds, the heavy cover, getting right into the pockets where fish are laying, laying on the bottom. So again, bass technique, and muskie guys hate that cover. That's a lot of work.
I believe it.
Because we throw stuff that doesn't go really well through that. But absolutely, it's a place to
my
be.
My question to you now, after we're talking about this, because I'm always digging for information as well, is that if that study that you heard of, the biggest muskies are sulking close or cruising the bottom, if I don't ever see my muskies that I catch, they're on the bottom, why do all muskie fishermen that I know throw the top 2 feet of water and that's it? They throw baits, even if they're in 30 feet of water, they're throwing baits that barely get down, except for the trollers that are, digging down with big crankbaits or something like that. You guys are throwing this stuff. You're throwing all up in that high area. And if these fish are on the bottom, why are you not working the bottom? That's my question.
Well, if you're in shallow water, you are within strike zone of a fish. So if you're in 6 or 7 feet or less, even if you're working in the top 2 feet of the column, for a 4-foot fish, it's not a long stretch to think about that fish going up. But out in deeper water, a lot of the baits that we use, I think yesteryear's musky fisherman was more reluctant to fish deeper, but a lot of people now are throwing bigger rubber or throwing baits that appeal that are better for fishing around suspended fish and schools of fish. And there are some baits that people are fishing on the bottom, in 25 and 30 feet of water now. Two musky guys are the last adapters of new technology. So we watch the bass guys come in with everything, catch a lot of fish for 20 years, and then we go, that'd probably work. And so like the big tube jigs, Mark Arena, Red October baits, guy in your neck of the woods, Waterwolf makes great tubes as well. Mike Nabulsi, makes a great product. So there are people that are doing that more and more. But we're right. We're less likely to go down and fish for them on the bottom. I think for us with the fish finder, we're looking for fish that are up off the bottom.
Correct.
And for me, that's a whole different activity level. If that fish is glued on the bottom and I'm throwing musky baits, that's a really tough fish to motivate to move. But if I see that it's up off the bottom, that's a whole different fish for me. And if I can determine that it's moving around, then it's much more in play. And so, using your electronics a big deal. On the jig topic, Pete, we were talking beforehand, and we were going to talk about smaller waters and bee waters. But when I started fishing in the late 70s and 80s, my fishing partner was Eddie Lalone. He's from River Rats spinner baits, which are still around today. But these are moose hair jigs. Now, we tied baits with every kind of roadkill you could get and everything that you could shoot over the years. And so, deer hair with deer tails, bucktail was tough to get. We went through a moose hair section, and I have a great collection of these. These are not the best. The moose hair is brittle, but they're incredible art. And the point is, we would put either a reaper tail on the back, you know, and
Yep.
that was big. That was big news in fishermen in the late 70s. Or on the Rita, we would put like a 5 or 6 inch sucker in the fall,
Yeah.
you know, not oversized. And we'd go out and work that on the weed edges and the drop offs, and we'd catch our fish when it hit the bottom, you know, in 10 or 11 feet. And so,
There you go.
you know, you bass guys, we got to pay more attention and,
you know what?
and learn more.
You have to. You would certainly think that the muskie fraternity would listen to guys that are saying that fish is a pest. Can you get them away from me? God, they're busting me up. They're just in a tournament. They're wasting my time. You guys got to take a clue to that, because I'll tell you what, we catch a lot of muskies accidentally. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and asking the bass guys when I'm out fishing, that's one of the things I always do. Is when I see the bass guys or the walleye guys, did you happen to see a big muskie?
Of course.
And every so often they say, right over there.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to deal with it. And so, you know, it's good intel. They're fishing in more cover than we are. And so,
Absolutely.
Stuff you want to know. Chandra Dinsmore with a question for you. Pete, do you find there's one color of lure you're catching more muskie on when you're not targeting them?
That's a great question, Chandra. And if you know anything about the typical bass fisherman, is that we always throw black jigs. We always throw black, blue, maybe brown in there, whatever. 90%, 95% of my incidental muskies are on black of some type, a dark jig. And it's not even that big a lure. Usually it's a 1/2 ounce jig, flipping jig with a 3-inch, 4-inch trailer on it or something like that. But that black color is just, but that doesn't mean those muskies wouldn't hit anything else. It's what we use as bass anglers a lot of times, right? That black down there. Look at that side of that.
That was what we learned when we were young. It was all blacks and browns.
Yeah.
Few whites because of the white bellies, but
you throw it in every now and then. Yeah, exactly. But that's the dark colors seem to they like you. I would honestly, in the waters, that a lot of these waters that I fish with the muddy bottom, you would think that these fish can't even see that bait. That's so wrong. Muskie, bass, walleye, they see everything that's going on down there. Like I don't know how. I don't know what their vision's like. Sean might be able to tell us more about that. But they get it. They can see a black bait on a dark, mucky bottom, and they pick that up like nothing. So
yeah, and even the sound of that lead head off of rocks on the bottom.
Oh yeah.
In an environment where there is no sound, and that's where you live, they are just attuned to that. And Pete, I'm gonna tell you, got to go back and look at the last episodes. Sean did muskie vision and the colors. We did the sound thing. You know, we've gone to muskie school on here answering all those questions.
I love it. Hey, by the way, I love this stuff. He's good.
Week by week, and they're all out there. So we'll stay on the jig session for a moment, because another thing about jig fishing, that was little rapalas around rapids. I learned that muskies were around rapids, and then we learned that muskies ate our jigs around the rapids, and we learned to jig fish when we were really young. And if you learn to jig fish, you can catch anything, because you learn a sense of feel, and that goes into live bait fishing. It goes into any kind of finesse fishing that you want, you know. And then if you extrapolate that into muskie, I'll go to the first time that we ever filmed together, and you had a new sponsor and you had a big rubber bait, and nobody threw jigs. You know, I was out of throwing jig style stuff for muskies or rubber stuff on the bottom for muskies, and you took this big 7-inch piece of rubber, and you carved it out and made it so that you could make it into a muskie size rig, tied it up, explained it, and we went half an hour later, and Pete's teaching me how to catch muskies off the bottom on the Ottawa in the rocks, you know, with a rubber jig at sunset. So
I remember that, buddy. I remember that. That was cool. I was so happy to get that fish. Not to say, hey, there, Johnny, I told you so. Just to say, hey, we got one. This is cool. You know.
Well, and that's one of the great things about being a guide, is you get so many teachers that come and look at where you are and show you a different way to approach it, how bass stuff works, how their timing works. And so, you know, again, it's one long learning curve, and
it really is. We don't live a long enough life, buddy. I'm telling you right now, because at my age right now, I'm saying, oh my God, there's still so much to learn. On one species, let alone all the species. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's fun, right? That's what we're so hooked on fishing for, is because the knowledge just keeps coming in. It's just like, oh, this is so cool. When you learn one little thing.
That's why all of us are hanging out here on a Monday night week
That's
after
it.
week, and so
that's it.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Sean said earlier, if you were out on the water, you'd see everything if you're out there long enough. What's the have you had fish eat your follows, or eat your bass, or eat your walleye, or what's the craziest thing that you've seen a muskie eat around the boat?
Yeah, probably all of the above for sure. I had one hit about 1.5 pound largemouth there, I think two falls ago. He just took a shot right at her and just had a hold of it, but let it go real quick. And it wasn't even a real big muskie, but it was enough. We've had as well more pike than anything. Grab a hold of walleye. T-bone a walleye way up north. They do that regularly up there. The big 40 to 44-inch pike. They do that all the time. As far as muskies, I haven't seen a whole lot of that I can remember. I can't say I should remember stuff like that. One of the coolest things I ever saw in the muskie world, though, was a pair of fish in pre-spawn, a pair of muskies in pre-spawn. We filmed it up on Lake Lozon, and I looked and I said to Ange, was with me. I said, Ange, there's some kind of an animal or something in that water way up. It was right on the bank, and it was just a dark shadow. And then as it got closer, it got bigger and bigger, and then it got wider and wider. I said, oh my God, it's two fish, it's two muskies, and they were just swimming like this. They just passed our boat like it was nothing. It was one of the coolest sights I've ever seen in fishing. I didn't care. We were smallmouth fishing. I just stopped, put the rod down, just said, look at this. This is amazing. It was so freaky seeing that. Now, there's nothing to do with fish grabbing other stuff in that, but it was cool to see two muskies working in a pair, like going ready to spawn or whatever they're going to do. You know what I mean? It was neat.
It's funny you tell that story. Billy Barber tells that story out on the St. Lawrence, and I can remember the first time I ever saw that in Menaki, Ontario. I was guiding walleyes, and we just stopped to watch these fish in awe for five or 6 minutes, and
it's so cool for sure.
You visited big water, medium-sized water, small water. Let's talk about some of the small water that you fished, and how fishing small water is different than big water.
Okay. So, wow. I mean, obviously your time spent is more on the fishing areas than moving around, because sometimes in a big water in Georgian Bay, you could travel for miles upon miles just to get to your area. And then if it's no good, you got to go somewhere else and all that. So definitely helps in your time consumption. That's for sure. And if you have prime, like once you learn your lakes a little bit, first time out might not be so lucky, but once you learn your prime structures on your lakes, on a small lake, a rock finger, a rock point that comes way out, with a couple of weed beds on it, that's primo right there. Somewhere during the day, you're going to catch or see a muskie along that piece. You can go back time and time again. Muskie guys, yourself, Gord Pies, everybody tells me about that. Go back to that spot because that fish will be there. That big fish is going to be there. You guys know the species really well, so that's great. And then the other thing about that is on smaller bodies of water, what I find is that it's easier to catch open water muskie. So because now an open spot might only be a kilometer around, you know what I mean? A mile, a couple miles around or something like that. So you've got all the nice weed edges. They're not working. You've got the rock face. It's not really working. You know what? Let's run a couple trolling passes through the open water like that. And in an area, you can make a big circle, make some figure eights with your boat and all that stuff. You can cover a lot of water in a small area, but yet you get a lot of the lake covered too. You know what I mean? By a small body of water. So it's kind of cool. And then the smaller waters. I got a buddy, Sean, and he put me onto a cool pattern he's got a really small lake that he's on. And he says, you want to catch a muskie? I said, sure, let's go catch a muskie. He says, okay, let's go. So we get in the boat. He doesn't even run the heavy gear. He just runs because they're smaller muskies. Puts the rods in the downrigger holders like that. I said, okay, well, we're going to troll them out there. And he says, no. The water's 18 feet deep, maybe 20 feet deep is the bottom, okay? That's a shallow lake. Puts them on the riggers. bass size spinnerbaits, big bass size spinnerbaits. 8 feet down each. Okay, we're going. I'm looking at him. Are you insane like that? Didn't take hardly any time at all. Boom, one of them went off. He does now when we asked, my wife wanted to catch a muskie. Sean just said, okay, come on. He takes her out, puts the spinnerbaits behind the downrigger balls, 8 feet down, speed trolls around, and boom, he's going to get them. It's crazy. Like, I don't know. And it's short line too. The cannonball would hit that fish in the head if it was sitting right in the area. You know what I mean? So it's really cool the way he does it.
So, and he's got the cannonball off the side of the boat or at the back of the boat?
Straight off the boat. He just runs them. He might run them a little bit, the post out a little bit, but not much. I think it's pretty much straight back. They're down and they're out about, the baits are 20 feet behind the ball, maybe something like that.
Yeah, that short line trolling is a real big deal in the muskie world everywhere. And it's funny because a muskie reacts. A muskie is the Marines, you know, they turn and go towards the noise. They learn that there's nothing in their system after they're 34 to 36 inches long. And they're going to spawn the first time. They learn that there's nothing that's going to attack them, that they own the river and they're not afraid of anything. And they've been around your boat for 5 or 6 years at that point. So they learn that the boats don't attack. And then they learn that the bait fish break up. And the smaller fish pay attention to the boat coming along. And so that bell goes off, and all of a sudden your boat is not an interference or a problem in their environment. Your boat is like ringing a dinner bell because all of those little bass are going to get excited, and the pike's checking to go what's going on, and the bait fish are up and moving. And and so right in around your motor, right in behind your downrigger balls. That's not something that a lot of muskie guys do, but I know they do out on the St. Lawrence. That's a good trick, and a good trick for a big fish, because you don't give a fish a long time to look at a bait in that situation. There's a motor, there's a lot of bubbles, the bait's there and it's going. Do you want it right now? Yes or no? You know, you ask the fish to make that purchase decision pretty quickly. It's not like a long follow and look or a lot of space in open water. So
it's a good control depth thing too. Like he's running his downrigger balls at 8 feet. So if he's running spinner baits, obviously they're not diving, they're not rising, they're not doing anything. They're straight behind there. He's running 8 feet of water, 8 feet deep. So if you wanted to run, let's say you didn't want to run your deep diving crate baits, you wanted to run a big sort of minnow bait, like a neutral or a floating bait or whatever like that. You can get that thing down at that 8 or 10 foot of water or 6 feet of water, hold it right there at that perfect depth that you think, work the rigger down a little bit or up a little bit. And you can, I think it's a cool little tactic. More people should be using it. If you have downriggers on the boat, a lot of muskie guys do, they have holders on it. Some guys have, not a lot of them, but a lot of them have, multi-species boats, those big, big water boats. Roll one in a rigger and try it. I think it's a great idea. It works. I'm telling you, I know it works.
Yeah, they certainly use them out on Lake St. Clair to effect as well. How is fishing a trout stream the same as fishing a big river? Like if you start to learn a trout stream, I think that's like going to kindergarten and through grade school, and it's all the same after that.
Yep. You basically learn to read the water. You learn to read current. You learn to read, in doing so, you find out where the fish hide, where the fish will come out and feed. Sometimes you get surprised, but there'll be a fish right in the middle of the rapids. You wonder what the hell he's been doing there. But for the most part, you're looking for undercut banks in these smaller creeks. You're looking for that log jam. You're looking for some wood, which is cover, a little strand or two of weeds, maybe that on that undercut bank. There's some weeds that are hanging down a little bit, acts more cover. You learn, and then you take that to the St. Lawrence River or something like that. Now, you're not going to be going looking for undercut banks on the shore necessarily, but there are some undercut banks down deep that if you can figure that out, you're just transposing that small creek to a river. You know what I mean? And current fish, no matter what they are, they all want to find that little hiding spot where they can just ambush out and pop. So, they want to conserve their energy as best they can and feed when they need to. You know what I mean? Like some fish, I shouldn't say all of them, because we catch so many smallmouth in the St. Lawrence that are just sitting there in the middle of the current. They're wondering, why are you guys sitting here, a school of 30 fish in there? But I think eventually they move in too. They probably move out of the current as well. But those big, like muskies in particular, walleye to a point, pike, they find that little crevice, they find that little wall, that rock area, the rock on the bottom, they get behind it and wait for something. You know what I mean? They really, they know how to use that river to their advantage for sure.
Yeah, being out of the current, whether it's a small creek, a small river, being out of the current, those current seams, again, the quiet water areas, it works exactly the same in the little streams. And I hear from a lot of people that, the Ottawa or the St. Lawrence, we show up, it's so big. And so, don't look at it as so big. Look at one section. Look at the features of it. There's a current, there's a heavy current there. There's calm water in behind the islands. It's all the same, it's all the same learning. I wanted to go back to something you said a couple minutes ago about small water being efficient water in terms of, where you can cover, the options that you have. And that efficiency in terms of learning for people is a really big deal in the muskie world, because we fish all day for, in the Ottawa, if we fish all day for one fish, that's a good day. We fish for closer to 2 fish a day. Those are really good numbers on the Ottawa, but you don't get to practice. You don't get to practice on figure 8 fish at the side of the boat, nearly as much as you do when you're on smaller water, where you're going to have more encounters. On the Rideau, instead of fishing for the 1 fish a day on the Ottawa, or 1 to 2, you're fishing for 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, on a lot of days on the Rideau. You have more encounters. You have more chances to practice around the boat. If you're with kids, it's a much more efficient family time, because catching no fish it takes special kids to do that. And often not young kids. It's not, muskies aren't necessarily the best fish for younger kids. Catching some fish is what's really more important there. But, the smaller waters and around Ottawa, or the Kawarthas, or so many places in Ontario, or I'll give the lakes of Western Quebec a shout out. We have so much small water around Ottawa with good numbers of fish, and again, in terms of things that you learn handling. You learn that a 15-pound fish is so much more powerful, so much more difficult to hold than the 4 and 5 pound fish, that you've been used to. And, all of that, very efficient in terms of time, and a great learning curve for families.
Absolutely.
So downsizing, do you find downsizing? What are some of your favorite baits that you've had success with on smaller waters? We talked about the jigs.
You're making me laugh on the downsizing, because I find, like I've always said this, and I always will say this, in freshwater, muskie anglers are the hardest of hardcore crazy people that I've ever met in my life. They are just, I bet you that whole list watching here right now is just hardcore is what I'm talking about. And when I first got out there, and I don't know if it was you Johnny, or who I was with, and I decided to try and fling out a double 10 bucktail. And I took about 5 casts, and I says, "What the hell's going on here? What is this? Well, there's nobody in this earth that can do this all day." And John says, "Oh, yes, there is. You're looking at one right now." You know what I mean? And I did the same thing with a guy up in Eagle Lake. You watch me go. You know what I mean? It's unreal. But what I did learn was that you use your equipment to your advantage. You showed me that one reel wasn't good. You threw a tranks in my hand, and all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, that's a little bit easier. You know what I mean? So you have to learn, and you learn by probably a process of elimination. But what I couldn't believe was just these giant baits that, in my mind, that musky anglers throw, those pounders, all that kind of stuff. It's like, wow, that is insane, and that is hardcore. But I wanted to say that because of the big bait thing, as you were talking about in downsizing on smaller lakes. I love throwing, like, double 8s would be the biggest I would throw on something on a smaller lake. And double 6s, or even, I like that, because you can still get nice bites. You get there, right there. You're talking my language, buddy.
That's what we call a burner, and so that's got some mag 7 blades on it.
Yep.
Just a single skirt at the back, and Jim Sarek, we had him on last week. He talked more about smaller baits than I've ever heard him talk about before, and not just in spring, at a few different times through the year. And so, downsizing, what a difference that makes for your enjoyment factor, for your wrist, for your Advil factor, for the day, all of those. And it's funny, another bait I got out to show these are Rob days. And so, Rob's the pioneer of spinner baits around Ottawa, and we like to think that we invented speed trolling spinner baits, around here. But that's a little smaller profile bait that's still got a heck of a thump, a really easy bait to get through the weeds. I still love Rob days for, you were talking about those fish in the heavy cover where you want to where you're throwing weedless bass jigs, jig and craw, that kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that a musky guy's letting sink down and working over. And again, that factor. We won't go down to those little tiny bass jigs, but this is part way there. We'll meet you.
Cut that wire off there at the front of it. I got a beautiful jig right there. You just held up. Let me say something else too, John. And I noticed this up on Eagle Lake. I've been up there a couple of times. The difference, the double 10 thing, the double 10s and double 12s. I really learned a lesson on that one, in that I was always throwing the downsized baits. I like that. I want to get some, like you said earlier on, it's hard to get a musky show. So I want to put something on camera. If somebody else can get a giant, perfect. But I want to get something on camera to at least get some of the show done. So I'll throw the double 6s, 7s, maybe 8s. The double 10s and 12s were the only baits that they didn't get bit, but they had giant follows. Those big fish wouldn't even look at a double 6 or a double 8. For some, I don't know if it was just a fluke or not, but any follow we got, figure 8 like that. Look at the size of that one. It all came with those big honking blades, and those big girls, they didn't want to eat it, but it got their attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's definitely the right size blade at the right time.
Exactly.
And I hate when they tell me that it's double 12s, because that's just, I got 10 good minutes for you with some double 12 fish.
That's it.
And so the 12s for me only come out when I know there's a big fish on a spot, when I'm revisiting, when I think that fish is really active. But they look way better on paper than they do than they do in the water. And any guy who makes blades will tell you that you sell double 12s once or twice to people because they look so good, and then after 5 minutes they're looking for something a little bit smaller. But yeah, for trolling,
big fish like
trolling, that's definitely a bait that you want to troll. Is with those 12s for sure. You fished. What did you think of the New Brunswick fishery?
Oh,
You've been out there. You've been out there a few times, eh?
Yeah, very cool. River system, St. John River. So it's a river system, but it fishes more like a long, skinny lake, because you don't really feel the current in it or anything like that for the most part. Well, a lot like the Ottawa, like your area there. There's just some current, but a lot of your area doesn't have current too, right? So there's some nice breaks and all that. It's a slow meandering current. Very cool bottom structure, up and down, lots of rock. Up and down and all around, you know what I mean? So the fish could be anywhere. The Gaspereau is their main bait fish, which is an alewife, and there's lots of them out there. So and unfortunately, there's still this misnomer, or whatever you want to call it, about the muskies eating the salmon and the trout out there. It's horseshit. It's not. I mean, if they do, well, I don't think they do. They if they had the opportunity, they might, but it'd be too hard a meal for them. But these Gaspereau, they're all eating, and that's just making these fish so fat and so so good looking when you see them. But the river is a really nice body of water. Most people troll it because there's so much of it. It's so long and all that. But you get the odd guy out there casting too. But it's such a every musky angler should go out and hit that river. Take a week, because it's the East Coast flavor to begin with. Great people, great scenery, and then you got a great fish that nobody out there really cares about. But there's a few of them out there. But you know what I mean. There's a small group that like muskies. So it's an awesome body of water. It really is. And you got giant stripers in it too. You can fish a spot, catch a 30-pound striper and a 30-pound muskie side by side, believe it or not.
Yeah, I love the striper shows that you've done out there, and that's on my list to do. I get stuck here in Ottawa, but one of these days I'm gonna get in my car and I'm gonna go start fishing.
The worst part for you is it's the fall too, when the big stripers are always in the fall, right in your prime musky time. So that's you know what I mean?
Yeah, my wife France is from the Gaspé, so I might have some family obligations I'll just have to fulfill during musky season out there. But yeah, I asked you about that because I thought that you would get around to the misnomer science on that, and it's funny. It is a little annoying that there's no evidence that the muskies are eating the salmon, but they're still taking this evolving and developing fishery. They're still taking the salmon out at the dam every year. So we had Marlon Prince on talking about that a little while ago. But yeah, a really neat place to go fishing. Dick Pearson wrote a book a bunch of years about fishing the shield muskies, and he talked about the armada, and that's a giant group of muskies coming in at the same time, or giant muskies in the same place at the same time. And I used to think that was a pipe dream and fiction. It's a nice thing to believe, but didn't really happen. But stories like your story on the St. Lawrence, and Sarik's told the same story, and Heiser about big group of fish in the same place at the same time. And your story on the St. Lawrence, catching I think it's the two biggest fish ever caught within an hour, in less than an hour, back to back, of any show that's ever been done for filming muskies. And that was on the St. Lawrence a couple years ago. I don't know if we want to show the video first, or if you want to, maybe we'll show the video first, and then you can come in and tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bottom or fish?
That's got to be bottom. Yep, I think.
It's moving towards us, isn't it? Or is that your drag going out?
Oh, it's fish. That's a fish. Yep.
That's a big boy.
Yeah.
Mayhem.
Mayhem and Brainy. I'm going to try and come around the side of the boat here.
What a gorgeous muskie. Woo! Look at you.
That's
Angelo. That's your biggest muskie ever.
Oh, for sure, without question.
Oh, bud. Look at that fish.
God. There you go. Beautiful.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Show that the world what that thing is made of. Oh, my God, buddy.
Oh,
what a monster.
That's as good as I could do, boys.
Oh, a little more. Can you get right there? Oh, my God. Ange, that is a beast. Okay, we got to get her back. Well, that's probably our biggest muskie on tape.
Yeah, I think so.
It's taken 30 years to get this fish.
I guess my work's done here.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Look at him.
Wow.
It's done.
I am absolutely blown away by that.
So you're a hardcore bass guy, and you had the day that muskie guys dream of their entire life. You had the hour that just, wow, what a story. I love Angelo's reaction at the end of that.
Oh, yeah.
As guys who fished everywhere for everything, that was a pretty starstruck moment.
Oh, yeah. I mean, let's be honest. Like, we've caught some decent muskie in our day. I mean, I've got some 50-inch plus fish. Nothing much higher than the 50s, but when you start getting to that 50 range, as everybody knows, those increments of 1 inch are huge, right? So when you get them that size, so that fish there, I believe, was around 56 inches. I'm pretty sure. And we didn't take a girth because we just did a measurement with the fishing line or something like that, and then measured it afterwards. Marked it on the boat. That's what we did. Marked it on the boat, and then looked at it afterwards. And then the girth of that fish, I have no idea how you'd even calculate a girth of that fish. You would know more than I would of that. But I'm telling you, it blew my mind when I saw that fish of his come up. Like, I said, this is your biggest muskie ever. It's the biggest muskie I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? You don't really realize, as a multi-species angler, never seen that, you don't realize how big these things can get until you say that. And then you go, oh my God. Okay, now that's a muskie. You know what I mean? So and then go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I'm just listening.
Yeah.
And with that size, there's a whole different level of power in terms of this fish swimming, in terms of the jaws and what they can do. I mean, I can tell you stories about watching jaws open and straightening hooks out just with the strength of jaws opening. So it's a whole different other level until and then handling. I know a whole bunch of people I'm trying to take pictures of people handling fish. That is a whole different fish to get a hold of to display and to get a picture
brought that
of.
Up. It's ridiculous. It is so, because they're not only are they dead weight, but they're slimy, they're moving, they're all muscle, they're everything, and it's such an unnatural. It's an unnatural thing to do one of these with that. You know what I mean? It's like, and you're talking, I don't know how big that fish was. I'll tell you what, hang on, right here. I'm going to show you something. This right here, I left this out. Hang on, don't drop it. That's only 45 pounds on that right there. That is hard as hell to hold 45 pounds in a curl position like that. You know what I mean? And now I put slime on this thing, a round body full of muscles, et cetera, et cetera. You've got one ridiculously hard animal to hang on to. That's all I can say, because I couldn't even hold mine up to do it. I couldn't. It went down. I had to put it on my lap. I couldn't even. I just had no strength. Like, I can pick up 45 pounds. I can pick up 55 pounds, but I couldn't pick that fish up. It was that was weird,
Yeah, and you have to experience that to know what you're getting into, and so that is a tough photo to get. And it's so tough to display. I mean, your images of the fish, I think Lisa has a couple pictures of them as well that maybe show them in their finest moment. If you throw those up, Lisa, or I don't know if that's for later.
Yeah. That's the only way I could hold that fish. I couldn't lift it up properly. You know what I mean? Look at this thing. It's a slob. It's a freaking thing. It's massive.
Yeah, and I have gone through that out in the boat. And looking after the fish, which is what we're all about. All part of it, displaying it, getting that picture. And so, it's a whole different adventure. Back to back, the greatest hour of musky fishing ever on film. And you had a camera for it. So 56. Now was yours the first or second fish caught?
So my Angels was the first at 56. Mine was 2 drifts later at 58 inches.
At 58 inches.
58 inches. For Ryan Fleur, I'll say 59 because he was the guide. But at 50, it was between 58 and 59. It's in that area. You know what I mean? So just ridiculous.
Absolutely incredible. In the middle of the day?
Yes, in the middle of the day. Now, it's very important here that the people know that it wasn't a fluke or anything. Ryan Flero is a walleye guide on the St. Lawrence River. And one of his key facts that he is very good at about locating fish is he runs an underwater camera, an AquaView. Okay. It's smart. A fishing guide, you know what I mean? You can run your electronics too. He's on Garmin stuff all the time, but he also runs that camera. And what he does with that camera, all he does is he's looking for walleye for his clients. But when he sees a big muskie, and he knows a big muskie, he knows that water, St. Lawrence River is a big muskie, just goes to the old Garmin, waypoint, giant. Okay, just leaves it. And sometimes he won't even fish those fish. He might never look at that again. But there's a lot of times that this is the ultimate family man. He'll say to his wife, to Gabby, "Hey, Gabby, you want to go out and catch a big muskie?" She'll say, "Yeah, sure, let's go out for the evening." He'll take her out there and catch a 55-inch muskie like it was no tomorrow. Like it's scary. This guy, you know what I mean? He's that efficient out there, and he's not a muskie angler. He doesn't ever profess to be in that. You know what I mean? It's not his game. He's walleye first, smallmouth. He's a good smallmouth angler as well, but he definitely knows where these fish are. Like you got to think about that. St. Lawrence is clean water, and he's running a camera down there all the time, drifting. So that's the key to it too. Like a camera in a still lake is one thing, but you're kind of have to spin the cable just to see around. You know what I mean? Like that. With this, he's just got that camera drop down. It's got a fin on it. It's going the direction. I think it's going the direction of the current, like that. And he's just getting a good little view in front of whatever. So he runs it by close to a structure or close to, a weed bed or whatever it is like that. And he's just going along there. And sometimes you'll see nothing. And then all of a sudden, oh my God. We've seen sturgeon on the St. Lawrence River with cameras before. That's so cool. So you see everything down there. You know what I mean? So that's what he does. He just waypoints it. And then he doesn't need the camera after that. Then he goes back with his Garmin. He looks at the map. Here's my waypoint. I'm going to go up river about 100 yards, dropper, controlled rip with your trolling motor, and you're good. Sometimes you're good. With us, it was good. So Angelo's on the first drift. Just to let everybody know. Angelo, we hit it on the first drift. He says, I know there's a fish here. Shoo, got it. Did another drift, 2 drifts or 1 drift? Nothing. He says, okay, got to move. Okay, we just got a 56-inch here. We're going to move. Okay, sure. Shifted over to another part of the same structure. I think it was, or very close to it. Another drift, drop down. Boom. I hooked mine. That's it. Day's over.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Wow.
Like, it was so stupid. I feel bad for all the muskie lovers out there that deserve that fish. Probably more, more than me, because you put the time into it, to see that lifetime fish. But I'm sure happy we got him. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and to have the camera there for that, and you contrast that with the last time we went out, 12 or 13-hour days of casting the double tens for 3 fish in 3 days. I think
exactly.
I think we got in a big one just at the end.
Yeah. Which is
we were grateful for that. But now that you've learned that you can just do 2 drifts and make a muskie show, I'm never going to see you again.
Oh no, I'll be back, buddy. I reality brings me back all the time. You know what I mean? There's a challenge there too. So
yeah, well, there's some good learning points off of that fish to talk about. One is you brought it up before about fish staying behind rocks, and when you have rock as structure, rock doesn't move. It's there year after year. Right. The same rocks providing the same current break, providing the same ambush points, and so. Your fish tend to get really loyal to rocks. I remember the first time going trolling in Montreal with a guide and he marked behind every rock over a couple kilometers, every rock that had a fish in behind it, and then we turned around and came back and crashed baits into those into those rocks. Yeah. To have something come right over the rock over those fish. And so yeah, absolutely. It's rocks are it in the river, and the same in northern Ontario. Yeah, and the thing about the St. Lawrence too is that most of these islands, even if you see these weed islands that are there, they just look like a giant weed bed. Well, if it's dropping off into 20, 30, 40 feet of water, there's rock there. That weed is only on the top of that underwater island or whatever. The rest of the side of that, the rest of that edge is all rock, right? So you see, a lot of times you see smallmouth tucked into these little spots, and they're almost impossible to fish. You got to run by a perfect, or you're not going to get a bait basket. But a muskie, you'll find, like John said there, that one big muskie will find the prime spot for that fish, and it will live there. It will tuck into that spot. It's got to be obviously 60 plus inches long for that fish to fit in. If it's an indent, let's say, in the rock that comes back out, but that fish will sit there. And I'll tell you what, that fish knows that spot, and Ryan's living proof that he will see that same or another muskie, but there will be a muskie in that spot almost 100% of the time, every time. So that same fish, he comes out and he grabs a walleye, he grabs a smallmouth, he grabs a sucker, whatever he's grabbing, but he goes back in there and digests in that nice little current break in that. And there's another point to that's on the St. Lawrence River that people can take it, because you got to remember this is a pretty strong current too. It's a couple mile an hour, this current, and if you see fish crashing, big boils out there, that's a muskie probably smashing a walleye or something. He's chasing down some kind of a smallmouth or a walleye and eating it, because that happens all the time out there. You know what I mean? So then you see that and you go, okay, there's a fish crashing that bait right there. He doesn't live too far from there because of the current. He doesn't want to, I guess you could say, doesn't want to be a mile down current, because now it's got to come all the way back up to its living spot. So it's making the efficiency of that whole area. So you watch for fish crashing, and don't think it's a sturgeon jumping all the time, because it's not. Because we've seen those big muskies come up and smash a walleye. And again, I'll go back to Ryan one more time. His clients, he'll be catching walleye, and all of a sudden, whoosh, T-bone, a 50 pounder, and come up and just grab that walleye like it's nothing. He gets muskies that hit their walleye all the time. So
So you keep that in your mind, and you can, you remember where that is. Then you can work that area for that big fish.
Yeah, we have the same issue with the sturgeon jumping on the Ottawa that they do on the St. Lawrence. And with guests, it's interesting educating guests because a sturgeon looks like a muskie when it comes out of the water.
Right.
It's long and thin,
Yep.
good size, a good size head. But the difference between those two for me is a sturgeon is most likely trying to shake parasites, and they come out of the water like a dolphin trying to touch a trainer's pole at an aquarium. So they're flying up and they're flopping down.
Yeah.
The muskies, if they're taking something, it's much more of a horizontal exit from the water. There's usually a curl involved, like they're trying to take a bait at that time. And so discerning what fish it is that you see coming out of the water is, important.
Absolutely.
Because some days we get 30 or 40 sturgeon coming out of the water. So you got a guest that wants to chase that and then go over there and chase that one. No, they're not. I know it looks like a muskie, but it's not. It's actually not.
That's awesome. That is hilarious.
What do you have left to? Where do you have left to fish that you haven't fished that you need to go?
That's a good one, buddy. That's a great one. Man, I'd have to think about that one, Johnny. I don't have a bucket lister anymore. I mean, I've been the most fortunate person in the world. I mean, as I grew up, at 18 years old, I started my electrical apprentice. I was an electrician for years, and then I met Ange and Reno through the tournaments, and then I hooked up with those guys, and then had the dream job. So I've got to see a lot of the country. I mean, the province for sure. Ontario, but I mean, I've seen a lot of the country, so I don't know if I'd have a bucket lister. I've never fished the Yukon, so I'd like to fish in the Yukon for whatever. I like the big pike would be my choice if I had a chance to fish the Yukon for big pike. But I've never done that. I think, and believe it or not, I've never been to Newfoundland. That's the spot that I'd like to probably go the most, just because of the people. Catch a big brook trout there too. You know what I mean? So either Yukon or Newfoundland would be probably my two choices.
And get screeched in before you catch, or after you catch that big
that might
trout.
Be the problem.
That's hard to believe. That's hard to believe you haven't been there. And I'm sure there's going to be some newfies writing in, giving you a hard time, and probably giving you a hard time, but then inviting you out.
For sure. But you know what?
Out there.
With my not with my accent, because I don't think I have an accent, but I get mistaken for a Newfoundlander all the time. Hey, Pete, you're from the Rock there, buddy. They're always asking me, whereabouts are you from on the Rock? And I say, guys, I'm born in Ontario, been here my whole life like that. No, they all think I'm from Newfoundland. So
Pete Bowman from Bowmanville. They named the town after you, right?
Well, they follow me around. I go to Peterborough, and then I go to Bowmanville, and I don't know where I'm going to go next. So
Bowmanville sounds like the right place for you to be.
That's too funny.
I asked you this before, but I'll ask you so we can have it out on the air. Have you ever been kicked out of Wawa, Ontario?
You know what? Okay, there's a non-definitive answer to that. Okay, I have been kicked out of a bar in Wawa, Ontario, but I didn't get kicked out of the town because our vehicle was broken down, so they had to make us stay. So we were paying for a hotel room. So I think they liked us because we were spending money. Ange and I talked about this not too long ago on our live stream. It was a very quick story. We did a shoot in Wawa area. Our vehicle broke down, and we decided to go out in the town. Me and Mikey Miller, who he's now with the Angler Hunter, but he worked with us for the longest time. And we had a great time. And we had an altercation in the bar that the DJ didn't want to play. Mike found a CD. He said, "Here, we request this song." "Oh, we don't play that kind of music here." Mike says, "Well, you got the CD here. Why can't you play the music here? You got the CD." So, long story short, it turned into a bit of a kerfuffle. And we just politely left and didn't make anything out of it and all that. But it ended up that DJ there was the mayor of Wawa as well. So that's where the stink started. So he had a dual purpose in life. So that's why the office got a call back that, "Hey, your boys were out and had a little bit of trouble going on in Wawa last night." So
yeah. I love Mike Miller too, but maybe you shouldn't let him do your public relations out on the road in the bar.
No kidding.
Might have been an idea as well. And One of the funniest stories that you told me. I've really enjoyed the time out in the boat together. You told me you had two new camera guys when we filmed together last time, Mike
Right.
and
Mike and Sebastian.
Mike and Sebastian. So they hadn't been with you very long, and you broke them in a really cool way on a trip to Peterborough going carp fishing. You want to tell that story?
Oh yeah, this is a great. So this is it's the ultimate prank from my point of view for sure. So I'll set the story up. So I got a good buddy, a really good buddy. He might be watching tonight. He's a musky nut. I call him the Hitman. I won't say his name. He's a cop from Peterborough. He's 6'8". He's a giant. Okay, 6'8". Okay, him beside me, I'm 5'4". He's like a ridiculous. But anyways, so I call him up. I says, "Hey, we're going to be shooting right in your town." He says, "Whereabouts?" I said, "We're going to go right down to the boat launch there." And so he says, "Okay." I said, "Why don't you stop by?" He says, "Do you want me to bust you?" I said, "What? You want me to bust you? Who you got with you?" And I said, "Yeah, so you kidding me? I got new guys with me and all that. Let's do this up right." So we're sitting there, and long story short, he comes in an unmarked car, and he starts looking around at my truck, looking around the boat. We had the truck and the boat parked on the ramp because I used the boat to go out and throw some corn out to feed the carp and all that stuff. And then I come all the way back in, parked it for the rest of the trip. He's looking at that, and the truck's full of camera gear and all that kind of stuff. And he's walking around like a big shot, 6'8", intimidating bastard. Like that. So he comes down to the boys. "What are you doing?" And the boys kind of talk in front of me like that. "Well, we're shooting a fishing show." "Oh yeah, you got a permit?" "No, we didn't think we needed a permit." "Well, you're shooting the city of Peterborough here. You probably should have a permit to shoot, right?" And blah blah blah. "Oh, okay." Looks over at my truck, and the truck's loaded with that gear. And he says, "You're running a little bit heavy, aren't you?" Like that. And he says, "Whose truck is that?" It's me. He says, "Running a little bit heavy, aren't you?" And I looked at myself. I says, "I thought I just been working out. I've been feeling pretty good." He said, "Don't get mouthy." So he really pulled it out. I turned up to this, mouthy thing, and he just did that. And then the boys, right off the bat, just said, "Oh, it's on." So then he goes, well, he had to show us the badge. First, he showed the boys the badge. I forgot to tell you that. So he said, "Hitman, Peterborough Police." Okay. Gets on his cell phone. He's doing pretend call, and he's at my truck and all that. Just then, "Your truck?" "Yeah." "You Pete Bowman?" I says, "Yep." He says, "Have you got an outstanding warrant?" I says, "What are you talking about?" "An outstanding warrant for DYI." And I kind of clammed. I'd play I've never been charged for this, folks, just so everybody knows. I says, "Well, yeah, I got charged." He says, "Okay, come with me." So he's walking me up the ramp now. So you got to picture this 6'8" cop walking me up the boat ramp to get away from the boys. Okay. And in the meantime, his other partner comes in, and this guy's sporting the arm on the 9mm on the side and all that kind of stuff, and the badge on. He's unmarked, but he's got the gun and everything out like that. So there's two giant guys. They're facing away from my camera guys. I'm against their car, facing towards the camera guys. These two cops are laughing their asses off, right? They're just loving this because they know the reaction that's going on behind there. And I got to keep a straight face. And I'm sitting there, "You guys are assholes. You know that. You're just like, I'm trying to keep a straight face, but they're razzing me on and all that kind of." So long story short, the Hitman walks me back down and says, "Guys," no, he called them up. "Guys, come up here." They come up, and they're green. Like they don't know. They're scared. They are really scared. Can you guys drive that rig?" And there's a boat behind him. They said, "No, we can't trail or anything like that." "Okay, well, we got to do something about this. He's going to jail." So, and so they were just they were trying to figure out, they were going to call Ants. When they were down by themselves, they're going to call Angelo, call back to the office, "Hey, guys, we're in real trouble like that." So it ended up just at the very end that he said, the guy said, "Pete, what do you want to do?" And I says, "Boys, I'd like you to meet my buddies, Hitman and my pale hair," whatever like that. And they just turned around and started laughing. And those guys they said, "You asshole." They gave us all, they razzed us. They were so like angry and relieved and laughing all at the same time. But it was the only thing we didn't do was film it. If we would have filmed it, that would have been the absolute best. You know what I mean? Seeing this great big cop and the other guy coming in with his sidearm on there and all that. It was the ultimate prank. I've never done a better one on anybody else in my life. So.
Wow, that's one of the best fishing pranks that I've heard of, and it's so Pete Bowman. So good on you. And are Mike and Sebastian still with you?
No, they're Sebastian was gone a long time ago. Mike just recently just moved on. So, but you remember? Oh no, you don't. You were that was so hot that day that one of them, I think it was Mike, or maybe Sebastian, they had sandals, they had water shoes on. It was so hot that day that the sunburn left the pattern of the sandal. He looked like he had panini feet. We called him panini feet for years after that. Mike couldn't even hardly walk the next day. He was, because they were wading in the water too, right? Because it was all cool feeling, because it's carp fishing. So you're walking in this cool water. He came back almost crippled up the next day. It was so bad. It was like, oh my God. But one had panini feet, and the other had just stripes. And oh, it was horrible. It's probably a horrible shoot for both of them.
Living the dream, filming a fishing show.
Exactly, for sure, buddy.
Living the dream. Wow. Well, giggling and laughing is probably a good place for us to end, Pete.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Thanks so much for sharing your time, your wisdom, for putting tears in the corner of my eyes, which happens a lot when I hang out with you. Appreciate that. That as always. And
can I give a couple of plugs, John? I'm gonna do we have two contests, one going and one more coming on. So on fishingcanada.com, if anybody wants to get in on a last little hurrah till March 31st, we're giving away a Garmin Live Scope ice fishing kit, $4,000 kit. So it's worth your while to get in there and throw some votes in, just in case. It's a random draw, as long as you get your votes in there. It's a beautiful system. I had it out what's today? I had it out yesterday. I had one of them out yesterday like that, live scoping around under the ice. It was very cool watching, learning about the structures, learning about the difference between forward view, down view. I won't get into all that, but check that out. We have a new contest starting April 1st. It's called the Great Ontario Getaway Giveaway. And this really can pertain to musky anglers, especially in that we're going to hook up with fishing lodges throughout the province of Ontario. And we're going to be giving away a bunch of trips for two to a drawn lodge. So in this hat of lodges, there's going to be some Northwest Ontario musky lodges up there, some world-class musky fishing lodges. So if you get yourselves in on that contest, you might have a chance. I'm not saying you're going to win a trip to musky heaven, but you could win a trip somewhere, and if there's a good chance you could win up in Northwestern Ontario, to have a great trip for two. All expenses, get yourself to the lodge, and then it's paid for after that. So that's our big one coming up right now. That's going to be a 5-month contest, I think, or something like that. So we're giving away a lot of trips, working with Destination Northern Ontario. So,
well, good stuff. And the lodges in Northern Ontario really need our support this year. They got no money last year. They're going to get partial money this year. They rely on musky fishermen, walleye fishermen, Americans in an open border. So good for you for supporting them.
That's what we're doing this for, Johnny. We're doing this for the lodges. You know what I mean? They're a lot of them are hurting, and we want to help them out and keep them going, because they're just hard working, true Ontario people. They want to do their business, but when you get to these places, they want to keep you happy. They want to get you on to fish. They want to do the whole 9 yards for you. You know what I mean? They're just like the rest of us. So we want to do what we can to help them, because it is tough for them right now. I mean, they're on the brink. A lot of them are on the brink of going out of business, unfortunately. So this is our little push towards them. So
yeah, support your Canadian lodges, and so
absolutely
wonderful. A pleasure, Pete. Thanks again, and I look forward to sharing a boat with you again before too long, my friend.
Buddy, I hope we can do it. I love that. That would be fantastic. Thanks.
Okay. Take care.
All right.